Hi, beautiful souls, and welcome to the Womb Oracle Journey, Grail Nights Speak. I'm Emmy, the founder of Feminine Revered and the host of this journey. This is actually the seventh time that I'm hosting a Womb Oracle Journey, a very auspicious number, I know. And for those of you who might have been with me from the very beginning, from the very first journey, you will know that I have featured women, female oracles who have channeled messages through their womb spaces for these journeys. However, this time round, it felt very important to bring through the voices of the sacred masculine. So I have gathered together seven very special men, all very unique in the work that they do in the world and whose voices are making a difference in raising the vibration on our planet. And today I'm very honored to be speaking with Swami Rahasya. He was actually the very first man who said yes to joining this journey. So thank you, Rahasya, for that. And I know his wisdom is going to tickle us in all kinds of beautiful ways. But before we go into our conversation, let me briefly introduce him to all of you. So Rahasya has been a lifelong student of Tantra. His worldly involvement has included the practicing of several professions, the learning of an unusual range of skills, and the sexual learning available through several relationship styles, including 14 years of monogamy. Teaching since 2002, several generations of his students are now significant Tantra teachers in their own right. Rahasya lives and teaches at the Satya Retreat Center in the Karoo, South Africa. Welcome, Rahasya. It is so good to have you with us.
Oh, thank you, Emmy. Lovely, and thank you for the invitation.
Absolutely. I can't wait to see where our conversation takes us today. And I would love for us to start by you sharing just a little bit about how you came to step onto the path of Tantra. It is not the most common path to walk. So, what is your story?
Oh, if I think 14, 13, 14 years old, I was at one of those very elite English style, what they call public schools in England that are anything but public, very private schools. And I came across a little book by Suzuki that some dear future student, I mean, past student had left there for me. And beginner's luck with a bit of silent meditation. And in there, I came across, I don't know if it was in that I came across mentions of Tantra, but similar reading. And I got interested. 21 years old, I met a really lovely commune of Osho's sannyasins in Johannesburg. Lovely guys. And I completely enjoyed, you could say that work was, and the work, the therapists of that organization, they were a huge part of my learning and teaching. I was very Catholic in the old sense of all embracing, learned from anywhere and everywhere, whatever was going. And South Africa, I was beautifully placed for that because, we're halfway between East and West by the old trade routes. And still, teachers come by here all the time. Cape Town is a wonderful, buzzy city of all that sort of stuff.
Mm.
I wasn't in Cape Town mostly, but things come up to Joburg when they want the money as well, where the gold mines are. And of course, Johannesburgers go to Cape Town all the time. They think of it as their holiday town. Um, and my journey just through the journey of Eros really, and the completion of Eros happened for me when I was basically 40, and I took sannyas roundabout then as well, very belatedly. I never felt pressured to, officially join the Osho kind of organization. And by the time I joined it, it's very much a non-organization, very much a kind of a neutral point in a way for a seeker. Nice archetype that. Um, and then finished with my own journey of Eros. I got a bit of surprise. Very quickly, four young ladies of intense inclinations got hold of me, and each recognized something and said, you can teach me. I said, but, I finished chasing that. I'm not run by my desire anymore. And they go, yeah, but that means you can teach something, and there's something you should teach me. Okay, and engaged with that. And all of them pretty quickly came into their power. Um, and then, of course, their power is the power of the Dakini, which, like it or not, carries massive authority in the spiritual world, more acknowledged in the East than the West, but massive authority anyway. And since then, they told me, look, expand beyond this, be more available, be available in this context, that context, get on a massage table. We've got people that can benefit from that kind of work, and so on. And all of everything I've done through my whole teaching, really, you could say, has been at the direction, the request, the insistence of the women. Um, I'm not their little bitch. I have a certain independence, but if they gang up and three or four of them get together, and there's more than three or four now, but they have to agree on a thing. They have to find their peace with it, and then they have to come to me with it. So, yeah, I don't exactly get my life run in uncomfortable ways. It's a gentle pressure, but when it counts, it counts. And the last thing um, that I did that was major was I resisted traveling to California. I've had invitations since 2013. I resisted a long time, but I went earlier this year, and my resistance to traveling has been broken. I did have quite a resistance, but there's been instruction about that too. And okay, I comply. I don't mean I comply instantaneously. You know, you women can get me to do what you want, but you sometimes have to insist, sometimes for a while. You know how it is. I'm a male. And so 20 years I've been teaching in the context of touch work, consulting, teaching groups, workshops, often teaching with another teacher because just helping them find their way with some techniques. A lot of the people I've worked with, teach groups, workshops, that kind of thing. In that sense, I'm kind of a bit of a Zucchero. Nobody in the music world knows who Zucchero is except serious singers. They know he's where you go if your voice trained if you want to be Paul Young. Um, and I'm a bit like that. I generally don't strive much for much of a reputation or public whatever, and anything out there in the public zone really. I don't think Tantra and what I teach is good for everyone or anyone except a pretty small subset. And but with those who show up and those who have some strong urge to learn in these ways, yeah, um, I've been available, and I'm getting pretty old now, but it seems I'll be available for a little while yet. So
We
we
certainly
carry.
hope so. Mm. Beautiful. Well, thank you sharing about your journey a little bit and starting to open the veils into your world as well. Now, there is currently a whole lot of seeming chaos in our world, a lot of division, a lot of polarity, a lot of conflict, stuff that can really bring a lot of fear into your life if you choose to allow to let that in. And I would also imagine there's been a lot of distortion of Eros itself, a lot of distortion of the path that you're walking on. What is your take on what is actually happening in our world at the moment?
In the culture. Oh, well, the biggest overriding factor that, sorry, this may be a bit unpopular with some people, but I'm a tantrika. You should have trigger warnings up before you see this video.
I shall do.
As Buddha predicted 2,500 years ago, he spotted the movement I would call hyper-domestication of humanity. And people can get reactive, but it's not a bad thing. There's perfectly good reasons. Humanity has to, in a way, lose maturity, come to a childlike quality before we really move on. And that move has happened. Buddha predicted that by our times, the average person would be getting married with the maturity of a 7-year-old and would be dying with the maturity of a 10-year-old. And in other words, pre-puberty, just like all domesticated species. You look at any species we domesticate, it tends to have the pre-puberty form, it tends to stay in that, it tends to have, smaller brain, higher compliance, bigger body, etc. And us humans are no different. We're creatures of this planet. If we hyper domesticate us, that's where we go. And given that, I'm surprised that the kids are even into sex these days, in a way. And a lot of them aren't. And a lot of them are thinking, why should I? And where they do engage with it, a lot of it is they're not really engaging, they're not getting close to anything of actual sexuality, anything of, you could say, the juices, the pleasures, the yummies, the yuckies, and that kind of stuff. They've got symbols. They've got symbols, blowjob, anal, this, that, whatever. And they tick boxes of symbols like the porn they watch. And, it's very much a 9-year-old, 10-year-old's kind of approach to sexuality. And it's not an age thing. It's not like my generation's doing any better than the younger generations. It's a planetary thing. Um, when people doubt this, I say, just for an example of a popular figure or an unpopular figure, I say, go watch some old footage, old interviews of, let's just pick Donald Trump as as an experiment, as a marker. Go look at videos of him when he's in his 30s, talking about things on some talk show or something. And then go watch anything of him in the last, 10 years. And you will see the maturity difference. It'll be strong before your eyes. That 30-year-old was steady. He expressed. I mean, he's not more clever. He's not, he's still playing his games. He's a master trained in the particular arts he's trained in. But the maturity level apparent when he's 30, and also it's the maturity of the interviewer, the maturity of the culture. And we have dropped. So that's a huge factor that makes relating very symbolic. This is why things like the concept of cheating is such a big thing, rather than the old, richer, more deep notion of unfaithfulness, which could have shades to it, qualities to it, even delights to it. And it got very mixed up in desire and it was complicated. Now it's simple. Nah, cheating bad, things like that. And also the stages, and this is going to get me unpopular too, and it's not a universal statement. I'm not saying all here. I'm saying a general cultural trend, the middle of the bell curve, the averaging. What happens with a lot of people, and again, not a bad thing, but what used to be developmental stages of passage, very natural ones, and things people even would move through really quick, especially the tantrikas go through them like lightning. Those stages become lifestyles in our modern world. And they are lifelong lifestyles very often. I mean, the kind of Tantra energy kind of people among things, they'll get the lessons of some community or something, BDSM world or whatever, and move on as they do. But for a lot of people, that's where they're going to stay. They're going to find their identity. You think of childhood as a whole quest for forming identity. And so now people are in it lifelong. It was a stage of development. And I'm not calling people who want an identity retarded. No, it's the cultural norm. It's the cultural way right now. This is where around my kind of work, working into what people would call traumas and sexual traumas and so on. If I did my work with, you could say, regular average people, very bad idea, because they're not going to start the process of maturation this lifetime. That's what that pre-puberty 10-year-old marker is about. And so maturation consists in catching up on every overwhelming feeling that was too much for you to feel in fullness, all the way through your childhood, catching up on the whole lot. In other words, having your subconscious give you desires to go, and the desire, you think the desire is for a happy family, but the desire is actually to go get the triggering of mommy and daddy and they're fighting and how that felt to you because you haven't finished feeling it until you finished feeling it. And it's a torturous journey. And if people aren't going to really start that journey, there's no compassion in pushing them into it. But for the tantrikas and those moving with high energy, I'm talking middle of the bell curve. But now when you get to the fringe of the bell curve where I live, there's no exceptions. The cultural background just makes it a little more difficult. I say to tantrikas, listen, you've just got to accept it really is difficult to soar like an eagle when you're surrounded by a bunch of turkeys. And it's not the turkey's fault. Yeah, like that's just something you have to navigate. I don't know if that's answered you or if you want to get more out of me on that, but uh,
Well, you've opened a couple of really beautiful portals there for us for sure. And I would really love to talk a little bit more about the domestication of humanity because that's, as you said, it's not really anyone's fault per se, but it is happening on a very large scale. What is the purpose behind that, and how do
uh,
we then move beyond that?
well, how to say, for me, a constant amusement, especially with social media, is when something is very well established, when it's absolutely been solid for decades at least, maybe even centuries, then people get alarmed, oh, it might be happening. When it's absolutely solidly happened. And for me, patriarchy died good 150, 200 years ago, dead, finished, gone. We've been living, you could say, with the stink of its corpse ever since, in a way. But the body of patriarchy is on the decomposition. What used to hold, like ligaments and things hold the tension together in the body that indicates life. The tension that used to hold the body of patriarchy together was the tension between principle and profit. And in every area of life, you might notice, now there's only one principle. It's called profit, and that's that. And you could say that makes us slackness. That gives us this corrupt quality. But, I mean, not that the world wasn't corrupt before, but the appearance, the having to hold up the appearance of being a gentleman, having to maintain reputation. These days, reputation, you go to a PR company, they fix your reputation for a couple of million, and there you go. Its reputation is just another commodity, and so on. So that the patriarchy died. And we have the dawning of the arising of the feminine power. And there's some characteristics it's going to take. And some people are going to hate this. The whole globalization thing. I don't find it aesthetically more pleasing than anyone else. I find some of it very ugly indeed. However, you can't really expect the feminine to take over if there's going to be competition. The feminine quality is overview. Overview requires that you can run the whole process. The world will have to get to a one government, one corporation, one bank. At that point, you can tell banks things like, listen, you count the beans. That the beans accumulate to you as a defect of the system, you will correct for that. And but you can't say that to banks while they need to compete with other banks, otherwise they're not in existence. No, but when there's one bank, you can say your bean counters, count the beans. You're there to facilitate transactions between the populations. That's your job. It takes four accountants, six big computers, and, not much money. It doesn't take much to do that job. Just do it for that job. Like you could say banking really kind of started there with that kind of ethic, but those things become possible. The other thing that you can't expect the feminine to do is take over, come into charge. You can't give the feminine teenagers to raise. Obviously, and definitely not adults. You can't raise adults at all. They're done. Teenagers are in a difficult stage and they're dangerous. That's not, and again, they're a little late to the game. But you give the feminine children, you give her 6-year-olds, 7-year-olds, 8-year-olds, 9-year-olds. She can do something with that. Feminine power can guide that. And when it's a good time that maturation is now wanted or useful here and there, the feminine will guide the maturation as well. And when you guide when the feminine guides a child through to adulthood, good. But when a dysfunctional patriarchy or a broken down system guides a child through to adulthood, it's a mess. So there's the perfectly good reason that why the bulk of humanity, always when we talk humanity, we have to always mean the middle of the bell curve, the belly of the bell curve. And also, I like to acknowledge statistics do not apply to individuals, to no individual ever. So no one in that bell curve is ruled by what I'm saying. But it's just the tendencies and the flows, the appearances that I'm talking about. And so that's why we've got to have an immature humanity, is because for the feminine to take over, you need children. And people are becoming more childlike and they are moved by childish concerns, and the feminine is arising. Um, I mean, again, with the corona thing, I mean, believe me, I deplore the whole awful. I mean, I'm sorry, I saw it as an awful scam right from the beginning. But I don't care what it takes. I don't care how many people had to be poisoned in what ways and how many people had to be panic attacked onto ventilators to die to get the statistics up. I don't care. Whatever it takes to produce the planetary unity that was seen then. And it's not about unity and agreement. It's unity about humanity was focused on one thing. Even if they were against it, they were still focused on it. And that is a passage point of humanity. That's the first real strong, obvious, you could say, um, unity of the planet I've seen in my lifetime. That was really, really, really unpredictable and really unbelievable for me. I mean, I double take the hell out over that. Like, wow. And we also heard from global overview. It doesn't matter if it's held in male bodies, female bodies, or hell if it's held in AI. Doesn't matter. Overview is overview. That's the feminine quality. And we heard the first voice of that, and it's exactly what you'd expect from like a 15-year-old mother who doesn't really know what she's doing. It was don't crowd each other. Yeah. It was like wash your hands, and if you've got the sniffles, put on a mask or something. you know, and oh, take your meds. And that was the kind of overriding direction we had from overview on the planet. And just as the individual women I work with, I say, yes, look, I know you want your power to be elegant and beautifully executed. You want that elegance with your power. Sure, there's only one way you're going to get there, of course. You're going to have to learn how to be really inelegant, quite ugly with your power, to discover the nature of power and find your feet with it, so to speak, and find your way with it. Then elegance can come. Then savoir-faire can come. Then all these qualities that you want can come. But if you're going to insist that you have to have those qualities before you move, you're going to remain immobile forever. So you're going to have to okay, we can choose the context. We can try to limit the damage, but you're going to have to exercise power. And that's the same with, you could say, the global feminine. It's got to start out immature. My vision of the global feminine roundabout now, more or less, it's like 15-year-old mama that's got a baby, doesn't have a clue what to do, and is sort of puzzling and working it out. And there'll be mistakes, and probably some of them will be really horrible, and there'll be gorgeous things. And that's how humanity's moving now. So for me, that's where that fits into the flow of the picture. I don't find anything in it to fight against or object against, but I know the whole world does, and that's part of the process.
Mm, indeed. Well, thank you for sharing so openly and courageously as well about what is going on in the world. I appreciate your perspective. And I love how you're describing the divine feminine and the rise of the feminine as well. It is talked about in such different ways most of the time. And I love this perspective that you are bringing in. Absolutely. What is the role of the masculine in all of this? Yes, the
Wow.
feminine is rising. What is the role of the masculine?
Yeah. Well, on account of that sort of immaturity factor, you're going to have a whole lot that are just upset that the things of being male have not been given to them, you know. So, oh, a lot of childish entitlement and stuff like that you can expect to see, and you certainly see it. Fortunately, don't worry about it too much. It's powerless of its own definition, really. It's a bitch about being powerless, really. But for men who are interested in being the lovers of women and getting involved in that aspect of life and so on, I mean, the general immaturity means the bar is really low, man. Any guy bitching about an incel, well, being an incel, well, how many yoga classes have you taken? How many women's magazines have you read? Have you looked into, do you actually like women? I mean, like, you know, because if you tick those boxes, you're in about the top 2% of potential lovers for women in the world. And Oh yes, oh, but we don't have the power. Yes, indeed. If you're having a salary, you don't get a woman who can't get employment, who's now dependent on you, etc. Sure, you don't get that in relationship anymore, and a damn good thing. Um, Also, how to say, from the masculine end, um, there's a lot of men out there reckoning, oh, the whole problem with women is they're not enough like men, basically, if you boil down what they have to say. And I'm saying, listen, it's developmental stage. You discover your eros, your heat first with yourself. Then you check notes. You another guy. You say, oh, when this happens, or that happens, and he says, wow, yeah, me too. And you compare notes, and you get familiar with how it is for your gender, so to speak. And then you step across, the big divide, if you want the wild excitement of going to the woman. And I'd say to most men these days, if you don't like women, just be willing to get over your ideas about the social labels of it. Maybe gay is better for you. Maybe guys are going to be, emotionally more of a connection for you and so on. And especially if you like them. And the woman is the different thing. She is the scary thing. If a woman can, and also I'm talking woman, not girl. Sure, girl, all you have to do to please a girl is let her know you want her. The eroticism of being wanted is such, it runs the girl's life. But with a woman, develop yourself, become an interesting fellow, really. Um, a mentor of mine, I sent a bunch of guys to an old mentor of mine to just get his advice. And they came back and I heard from them. It was really sweet. He was so up to date. I thought he was going to give them the same kind of stuff I heard from him. But no, he said, listen, back in the day, guys, you had to become worthwhile. You had to find a craft, a profession. You had to become excellent at something. And you had to, basically hold down a nest, be available in the community, have the right income to be at the right kind of events and places and so on. And, then you get together with the right kind of women and so on. And it was a whole drama. He said, you really can relax now. It's so easy. Hang out, learn a few things that interest you, become an interesting person. You don't have to provide all that stuff for the women anymore. Any woman of any kind of power can provide that kind of stuff for herself just fine. She doesn't need you for that. And, hang out and let's be their lovers when they want us. In the meantime, hey, life's much more free. The requirements are much lower. You don't have to chase a career. You don't have to work out how good a slave you can be to the system and so on. You've got other options. So you could say I'm jealous as hell of young guys coming up and growing up now. Wow, what a sweet time to be a male. And yet I see all these entitled youngsters all offended that they don't get issued a woman and she doesn't love them. And, you know, but I'm sorry, I'm not deeply sympathetic there, but I'm also very aware that, and I just say the surprise for me is why are you guys even interested in sex? Just give up, you know. Like there's a lot of people, the belly of the bell curve. It's a symbolic thing. It's a tick the box thing. They're not even letting themselves in on the encounter in any sexual moment of actual, what is this? And really letting themselves feel it. They're checking, oh, have I touched a boob? Have I had a blowjob? Have I this? They're checking, they're dealing in a world of symbols. I mean, you might as well play a video game, and some do.
True, very true. Yeah. Well, Rahasya, what would you see is kind of like the most important thing that we should kind of be focusing on, the kind of next steps that we should be taking so that we are doing our best to support the the transformational process that our planet is in and our and humanity as a collective is in.
Well, I would say again, I'm not talking to the belly of the bell curve. I'm talking to those who have stronger urges, who find this maturation thing as a background factor. Yeah, they can see it, but they don't really partake in it, and so on. And it's really just how to say it, the best thing I believe that you can do for the planet is you move as per your desire, as per your inclination. If I have politics, I'd be a Taoist. And the attitude there is the people should, as far as possible, be free to their inclinations. We can debate about that far as possible, but the general thing of if you are on the path that you're going to be maturing, well, you've got to follow your desire. You've got to let it bring all what we call triggering upon you. You've got to suffer through all the feelings that arise and complete them instead of suffering your resistance of going to the pain of them again and again and again. That's just for your own account. That's just your suffering. But getting through that stuff, moving through, and that's male or female, that's the trip. In other words, women become women and men become men. And the men with the inclination to um, polish some attributes, become good in some respect, become of use in some ways. Understand, the male function is to be of use to the feminine. Even the patriarchs who go, but the women are supposed to serve us. No, no, no. You think men dreamed up patriarchy? Patriarchy was the way the woman gave us men free reign for a couple of thousand years, nothing, few thousand years, nothing significant. They gave us free reign to show up with what we can do. And it's always been in service of them. Say to Winston Churchill in the 60s, they asked Winston Churchill, so by the year 2000, will women be running the world? And he said, yes, they will still be at it. I mean, all those great principles of patriarchy that ran the Western world branch of it, all the great Greek statesmen and philosophers, all of them, every last one of them, raised to their power by what I call a dakini, what they called a hetiara, every last one of them. And at the absolute pinnacle of the elites in this world at the moment, don't think that that's over.
Mm.
It's secretive. You're not going to find them. They're not going to be on the pages of Vanity Fair, but there are hetiaras in this world who still charge a proportion of a family's assets to educate their kids in these ways. The hetiara were always the richest in a town. That was part of their authority. And they started patriarchy off. No, they didn't start it off. They gave it its polish. They gave it all that stuff I was talking about earlier, the principles that held it together for so long that are now over. And so if you're a woman, really become a woman. If you're a man, really become a man. As much of a man as you want to be, as much of a woman as you want to be. Um, and yeah, don't fuss too much about what's going on with the whole of humanity. They're perfectly good. They move at their own pace. It's a big one. Avoid making the anarchist's mistake. The anarchist's mistake is where you get diverted into becoming an activist for something and all your energy goes there and it's not really even wanted or useful. If you look at it, the anarchist mistake is when you think, if they saw what I saw, if they knew what I know, they would feel as I feel. And that's a huge error. And I'm not going to explain why. Just make it a few times. You'll work it out.
Beautiful. Thank you so much. I know I'm going to be re-listening to this interview a few times as well, because I know you have shared a lot, and there's a lot more that was shared in the pauses and, behind the words that you used as well. So I'm going to be listening to this again. But Rahasya, if our listeners wanted to find out more about you, perhaps reach out to you as well, what is the easiest way for them to do that?
The easiest way would be to uh, look me up online. Rahasya is spelled Rahasya. There's about, I don't know, I know about five or six Rahasyas in the world. It's not a name old Osho gave a lot. My prefix, which sometimes comes with such a name, is Advait, which is for Advaita. And names are a whole game in their own right with that stuff. But Advait Tantra School, there's a Facebook group that you should be able to track down no matter how your spelling goes. Um, and I've written a little book. It's out under two titles at the moment. The one is Terribly Tempting Tantra, and that one's got no presence or reviews yet on Amazon, but it's there, and That's the latest. That's slightly revised. No, not really revised. It's very much the same book. A couple of changes, like three changes, and a rebranding. Really, what it used to go under the title of was more off-putting, was the Rocky Horror Tantra book, and some people have a copy of that one. You can still get either, but the Rocky Horror Tantra book is going to be vanishing, and terribly tempting will be the thing, and that should be findable at Amazon. Yeah, no, that's good enough for me for contacts, I hope.
Beautiful. And we'll include the links to those in the show notes as well. Hasya, is there anything else that's still rising up for you that you feel would be important to share with our audience before we wrap up?
Um, or just a quick, what I call an apologia. It's kind of traditional if someone from the culture, regular people maybe get to hear you. Why should the culture tolerate Tantra? And it doesn't really have to tolerate it that much. In fact, it's quite good for Tantra when the culture doesn't tolerate it. It pushes us harder to our individuation and makes us keep our secrets and that kind of thing. But I would suggest that Tantra is very analogous to martial arts. Martial arts deals in violence. Violence is illegal. We don't teach children how to do violence. If you grow up and go to a schoolyard or something, violence happens. Nobody knows what they're doing, typically, and they just engage with it cluelessly and so on. And yet there are those who study violence, those who train themselves in it, those who have schools where they really work with very violent practices. I mean, I hate to break this to some of the world who might not know, but in martial arts schools, they really do hit people real hard, especially at the upper levels. Um, a friend of mine married to a doctor after his fourth Dan Taekwondo grading, or no, Shotokan, anyway, whatever style it was. She saw him after that. She said, "Oh my God, I've seen people die of less bruising." That's the level a martial artist will take their body to sometimes. And us tantrikas, much as we may be scary or we may be weird or, I'm sorry, we're the same. We work consciously with energies that are just likewise as illegal, as frowned upon in the culture, and so on. And if you're thinking of, oh, the Tantra schools, oh, do they do sex, this, that, the other? Yeah, we do sex exactly like martial artists do violence in a reasonably contained way, but sometimes just as powerfully as it'll be in any brawl, sometimes just as strong. And for me, that's a really sound analogy. And for me, that's the reason, that's the nearest I get to an appeal for tolerance. Just think of us as a martial arts school. Yes, if we're teaching bad people and they're out there doing bad things, sure, there'll be objections about a martial arts school if it's training a little bloody street gang of thugs. Or, in this case of South Africa, we had a bouncer gang that was one martial arts school. It was terrible. But, so some tantrikas are terrible too. Yes.
Mm.
Mm.
Thank you for concluding this with those words, Rahasya, and it feels more like to be continued rather than a completion in a way. But I really, really appreciate coming onto this journey with us and sharing a bit of your world and bringing through your perspectives on what is actually going on in our world and
Mm.
your description of the role of the masculine and the feminine at the moment. Thank you so much for your, I keep saying this, but thank you for your courage to do the work that you do and be who you are. Appreciate
Oh,
you.
that's why I stay so low key. I don't have that much courage. But thank you. It's a delight and a privilege, Amy. Really.
Bless you. Thank you so much. And thank you, everybody, for tuning in. I hope you have been triggered in a good way. And I hope you're going to take a few golden nuggets of wisdom from this conversation as well. I'll talk to you soon.